If you carry a firearm and discharge your weapon in self-defense, you could face hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees and expenses. So carry the protection of CCW Safe, Self-Defense Legal Services membership. Upfront payment of all criminal and civil defense costs with no out-of-pocket for members.
Scenario. It's 9:14 in the morning on a Tuesday. Coordinated mass casualty attacks detonate simultaneously across 25 American cities. Active shooter teams hit crowded transit hubs. Bomb threats go live at airports, malls, and hospitals within the same 90-minute window. Emergency broadcast system activates in 12 states. Cellular networks buckle under load and then go dark. Rolling blackouts cascade across 3 regional grids. EMS collapses under intake numbers no surge plan was built to handle. Governors declare emergencies, the National Guard deploys, but the scale is beyond anything pre-positioned for. By noon, the stock market halts. By evening, currency panic begins at the ATMs that still work. The attack is not the story, it's only the opening move. The real question is not what just happened, it's who will fill the vacuum that comes next. The post-crisis authoritarian governance model is the enemy at play here. This is not a theory. It's a documented historical pattern that activates every time a nation state absorbs a catastrophic shock. The model works like this. Emergency powers expand, civil liberties compress, and the temporary measures calcify into permanent architecture. What they want is the crisis itself, not to survive it, but to exploit it. Every expansion of centralized digital control, every rollout of biometric ID infrastructure, every public-private intelligence fusion push waiting in the wings right now is designed to ride the wave of exactly this kind of civilizational shock. Al-Qaeda, ISIS, and their affiliates provide the kinetic trigger, but the authoritarian technocracy bloc is the waiting beneficiary. The attack is the pretext, the control grid is the end game. It's February 20th, 2026. Welcome to Survival Dispatch News. I'm Chris Evans, the CEO of Survival Dispatch, joined tonight by my good friends Randy Nance, Ted Yoho, and our good friend 00711, Khalid Muhammad from Command 11 is in the back. So let me give you the bluff on tonight, the bottom line up front. 9/11 2.0, complex coordinated terrorist attacks on 25 plus American cities will represent more than a disaster scenario. It'll be a civilizational trigger that determines which world order rises from the ashes as competing systems, from authoritarian technocracy to radical Islamic states and regional power blocks, all fight for the territory freedom leaves behind. Why does this matter? The future will not be one global civilization. It will be competing systems fighting for dominance, and the model that consolidates power fastest after the next major attack will reshape humanity for generations. So what we're covering tonight is we're going to map out the power consolidation playbook, the competing civilizational models, the information warfare machine, community defense doctrine, and what prepared Americans can do right now to stay on the right side of this fight. So as per usual, we have 5 segments, and the first one is titled Power Consolidation Playbook. What happens to liberty after the attacks? Every major shock event in American history, from the Civil War to 9/11 1.0, produced emergency power expansions that were sold as temporary and then institutionalized permanently. And a 25-city coordinated attack will trigger the largest peacetime consolidation of executive authority this country has ever seen. The legal architecture for that consolidation already exists. Over 120 statutory powers unlock the moment a presidential emergency declaration is signed, giving the executive branch authority over commerce, communications, travel, and civil order simultaneously. The question is not whether emergency powers will expand after such an attack. They will. The question is whether the American people will have the situational awareness and the organized resistance to push those powers back when the dust settles. So with that being said, let me get the entire crew on screen here. Welcome, gentlemen. Ted, I'm going to come straight to you. And for those of you who are not familiar with Ted, he was a congressional rep for 2 terms. He said he would run twice and then step down, and he did. He's from Alachua County, Florida, 29 years as a large animal veterinarian. Ted, I noticed you point to yours. Can you hear me? Ted, can you hear me? Ted's having some computer issues there. So I'll tell you what, I'll go straight to Khalid with the first question, then I'll come back to Ted when he gets his ears working. So Khalid, here's a question for you. Based on what we saw post 9/11 1.0 with the Patriot Act and the creation of the Department of Homeland Security, what does the consolidation timeline look like after a 25-city event? Are we talking weeks or days before emergency powers lock in?
Hours, not even weeks or days, hours.
Oh, wow.
If you look at what's going on right now, let's break this down. Back in 2001, when 9/11 first happened, you didn't have a Department of Homeland Security. You didn't have an active Department of War. You didn't have the AI or the technology that you have today.
I can't hear you.
You're literally going to see a massive switch over to the Palantir system. Palantir has already engaged itself inside of hospitals, inside of police stations. It's gotten major government contracts. It has gotten access to ring cameras, to surveillance cameras. You are going to see within hours of this attack happening, Palantir being rolled out, and Patriot Act 2.0 will end up being Patriot Act 4.0, where you will literally lose all of your rights and everything will be controlled by a computer system or an AI system.
And you're just all kinds of good news from you here, Khalid. So, Ted, have you got audio now? Can you hear me?
No.
The only thing I can suggest, Ted, is go out and come back in again. Exit the studio, come back in if you can catch that. So, Randy, I'll go to you next here, and then I'll message Ted on the side. So, history shows that emergency powers declared temporary almost never fully revert. What specific mechanisms exist right now that you think a future administration could activate to keep those powers permanent after attack on this scale of 25 plus cities?
Well, I'm not exactly sure what you're looking for, but basically, we could just go to September 11th and look at Patriot Act, right? Now they can spy on U.S. citizens. They have to get a FISA warrant, but we see that that's not very hard to do, and they can fabricate them quite easily. So, the problem is exactly what you said. And it's historically, it doesn't matter what government or monarch, or we can go back as far as time to where everybody was still dirt. And anytime the controlling powers, under an emergency seem to gain more power, it's just ironic that it seems like those things never get dialed back. We can even look at after 2020, right, and COVID and the lockdowns, and there, states like Maine and the other one that that had the female governor that was almost kidnapped. They didn't turn those states back over until at least late 22, but maybe even into 23. And the problem is, it's because the people are normal. People are human, and and humans like to have power over other humans. And the fact is, and then when you've got people like what we've got today, they just want to control what everyone else is doing. And so I would suspect that Khalid's right. It won't take very long, as we talked about either yesterday or the day before. They've already got this thing ready, set to go. All they have to do is punch the button when whatever event happens that they deem necessary, or that now they have the ability to do that. And again, it's always under the guise of the interest of public safety. But the problem is, just like Patriot Act 1.0, they end up using it against us in ways that were not intended, that they're not supposed to. And I don't think it'll be any different this time, but it'll be worse than we've ever seen it before, because, as what Khalid just mentioned, because this will be surveilled everywhere you go, in your house, outside in the public. I don't think it'll matter at that point, because not just every electronic and ring camera, but anything else they can tie into through the internet, they'll be spying through.
And that's a great answer, Randy. And I purposely made that question open-ended so that you could go whatever direction you want with. So I see Ted's backstage again. Ted, can you hear us now?
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Okay, perfect. So I've got a question for you.
Sure.
The Weimar Republic invoked emergency provisions over 200 times, and it ultimately handed Hitler the mechanism he needed. Do you think Americans in general just, understand that comparison well enough to resist it in the aftermath of a mass casualty event?
I think if some of them do, but I think the mass majority of them don't. I don't think they do. And, history repeats itself, unfortunately. And we're at a point in time with the geopolitics going on, with the conflicts going on in our country. We're in a very precarious time, and not enough people understand that. As you know, I do a podcast with John Martin twice a week, and our goal is to educate, motivate, and activate people. And then you look at some of those news programs where they go and interview the people on the street. Who was in the Revolutionary War? People can't answer that. Who fought in the Civil War? They can't answer that. So we have an ignorant population. And as it goes back to our founders, the only way you can keep a constitutional republic is if you have a well-informed electorate and educated. We don't have that today.
Yeah, that's well. It's a scary proposition, to be honest with you.
It really is.
Yeah, when you put it that way. So, Clee, coming back to you, if and when federal response capacity is overwhelmed, which it surely is going to happen with 25 plus cities, as your intel is now showing, being attacked simultaneously, how do state governors and local law enforcement navigate the gap between federal emergency declarations and maintaining some semblance of order on the ground?
Well, your first problem right now is that you've got so many states, so many democratically run states, Democratic Party run states that are against federal law. So seeing how they react is going to be the first problem, because when you have a terrorist attack of this level hit a country, when you have states that are actively against federal policy, the impact on those states is going to be significantly worse, and it's going to limit the ability of the government to be able to move at the speed it needs to move at. The second thing you need to look at is when you are looking at how a nation's going to react. Federal Powers Act, in my opinion, the War Powers Act will be enacted almost immediately. Trump will be able to roll out the military to handle the problem, but when you have so much of your military sitting in the Middle East right now, if an attack were to happen right now, you have no defense. All of your spec op teams, a majority of your weaponry, a majority of your forces are sitting on the other side of the world. And while they're sitting on the other side of the world, you've created a massive opportunity back home in the US for an attack like this to be carried out.
Legit comment. I wrote a 3-part series of articles on that last week, and I couldn't agree with you more. Randy, I'm going to open the second segment with you, but before then, I've got a follow-up question for Ted, just because he was a legislator. Ted, what is the single most dangerous piece of existing emergency legislation that a bad actor in government could exploit in the aftermath of a coordinated multi-city attack to consolidate control under, the cover of crisis response?
Oh man, you want a single one? I think FEMA is probably one of the most dangerous ones when you get into a crisis situation. That's domestic terrorism. The other one would be the Patriot Act. Jim Sensenbrenner, he was the one that sponsored that in the House, and he said that was the worst piece of legislation he ever sponsored. He tried to get it repealed, couldn't do that. And then, of course, out of 9/11, what we saw was the creation of agencies, one of them being TSA. It was supposed to be a temporary agency, and it's one of the largest government employees right now that are employed in there as a TSA. And then I think what you're going to see is the way that the government can control the internet.
everything digital, they can control it. And we've seen this in China. We've seen this in other countries that have adopted their policies and the electronic surveillance. And when our government has the capability and capacity to do that now in spades, but they haven't really done it in an authoritarian moment. But the day will come if we go down this or you elect another Kamala Harris or Biden to where they will be monitoring every step you do, and they can shut off your finances and shut off your telecommunications, and the game's over. We saw that in Canada with the truck driver.
When we mentioned that this week, I got to ask you one more question just because
Sure.
you're a congressman. Speculation on whether or not Patriot Act 2.0 is written and sitting on a shelf, figuratively speaking.
I think it probably is. And, when the Patriot came out, I mean, everybody was behind it. It was 9/11, it had to come out. Everybody was rallying. I think it came out in a month's time. But the FISA courts, they gained so much power. You have these judges, FISA judges, that have closed room hearings. There's no notes taken, no minutes, nothing. It's just the transaction of talk going on there with no record, no accountability. And we saw how that got abused under the Obama or the first Trump administration with Peter Strzok, James Comey, how they abused that. And I'm not a lawyer, but I read the intelligence briefing for the Russiagate, and I can understand how a FISA judge would sign off on the first one, but when they came to the second, third, and fourth, everything was predicated on the first one was found to be a lie, but they kept issuing FISA warrants, and that's the dangerous thing because you have a weaponized federal government, whether it's the DOJ or whatever branch it is, when they weaponize that, and we've seen that a lot under the Biden administration, and we saw it under Obama too with the Department of Labor and things like that. That's when you have that authoritarian control that people voted in that takes away our freedoms and liberties, and it's not acceptable.
Yeah, I appreciate that thorough explanation, Ted. It was 45 days from the time 9/11 hit until the Patriot Act 1.0 was signed into law.
Yeah.
Which, in your experience being in Congress, I mean, that's light speed for something to move through Congress.
Oh, it really is. And the funny thing, Justin Amash was in there with Thomas Massey. We were all classmates. And they kept saying, we got to repeal this or that one section. I can't remember the one section, the wiretapping one. They said, well, government's spying on you. And they were so concerned about that, which we should have been. But you fast forward, that was in 2013, 2015, when we were real heavy into that. You look at it today, 10 years later, it doesn't matter, because the government has the capacity to look at everything, this broadcast, every cell phone you have, and they can get that information, and they can find a reason to look at your information and tie it to somebody, out there. It's just scary where we're at. And then you throw in AI and quantum computing, how fast it'll be able to manipulate it. It's almost like the Terminator movie.
It's exactly.
I had a death threat, and I called it in. It was December 8th, a couple of years ago, and it was unlike any I had before. So I called the FBI. They tracked the guy down within a matter of days, and that signal goes all around the world, different servers and that. And they caught the guy in Washington State, and that's how fast they can track that stuff down. So in that case, it was a good thing. But if it's you and me talking on a broadcast like this, or Randy or Khalid, if somebody doesn't like you, they can well, you know what they can do. They can shut everything down. They can take your liberty and freedom away.
Yeah, exactly. So let's move into segment number 2, the 4 competing civilizational models. So the world fracturing after 9/11 2.0 will not reorganize into one global system. It will split into distinct competing blocks. The authoritarian technocracy model led by the CCP-aligned governance, the radical Islamic State model pushing Sharia-based regional control, the fractured warlord and regional bloc model filling governance vacuums, and the shrinking pockets of genuine Western liberty fighting to survive. Samuel Huntington mapped this civilizational fault line structure in 1993, and he was right. Cultural identity, not ideology or economics, is the primary driver of how populations organize themselves under pressure, and the pressure of a catastrophic multi-city attack would accelerate that realignment in real time. The model that wins the post-attack world will be determined not by who has the biggest military, but by which model can most rapidly restore order, deliver resources, and project a compelling narrative of stability to a terrified and displaced population. So, Randy, I'm going to come to you first. I'm assuming you're probably not familiar with Huntington, but his class of civilizations framework predicted exactly the kind of fault line collision we're describing. Where does the evidence today show that his model is playing out faster than he ever anticipated? And I would preface it by saying, just look at China's Belt and Road Initiative. I mean, that's a great example of the CCP trying to expand their governance around the world. You're on mute, Randy.
All right. Yes. So, so that's one initiative. We have also seen them in Russia cozy up like we've never seen before. You look at, heck, we could just take our own country for an example, right? I tell people all the time now, we're talking about this sort of thing. First of all, I would have ever thought this was going to be possible, like where we're at in the United States right now as a country. I never thought would be possible in my lifetime. I thought we were so good that this was not possible in any kind of a real time frame. I wasn't even sure if it would happen in my kids' lifetimes. But clearly, pretty much since the 2008 time frame, you look at how much things have advanced forward and how much certain things have unraveled, whether it be racial relations, customer service. Let's go into the public space, mutual respect. We've seen a lot of things erode very quickly that, like I just said, there are some of those I just thought weren't possible. But boy, was I wrong. Boy, was I wrong.
I think that goes for all of us, Randy. I think we were all wrong. I want to come back to the CCP with you, Ted, in a second, but I got to hit Khalid with this question. Khalid, the Islamic State model relies on a concept of the Ummah that transcends national borders in the context of a 25-city attack. How does that transnational loyalty structure function as both the attack mechanism and the post-attack organizing principle? And maybe you could just explain for people like me what exactly Ummah is.
Well, the Ummah itself is the actual body of all Muslims. That's what, like you have the body of Christ, it being the church. The Ummah describes what all Muslims are when they are combined. The problem you have when you talk about the Ummah itself is divided into so many different groups that not everyone agrees with the way one person would lead the movement. It's the reason why the Middle East is in so much shit as it is, because every country, 57 countries in the Middle East, all of them Muslims, and none of them get along. Literally none of them get along. It's because as a people, the Muslims have so many divisions amongst themselves, whether they be religious, whether they be geographic, whether they be ethnic, that they have trouble agreeing on anything. And that will make it very difficult to establish a caliphate as the Islamic State would like to believe, or as Al-Qaeda would like to believe. The mentality behind what they want to do is not just take over, but they want to deploy a version of Sharia law that existed 1400 years ago. And when you talk about the Sharia law that existed 1400 years ago, that means that what we were taught as Muslims, that the Quran is a living book and you must interpret it based on the time frame you are living in currently, disappears. The idea of the 1400-year-old Sharia law is something that's followed by the Salafis and the Wahhabis, which are intrinsic to the state of Saudi Arabia. You're going to have a lot of problems trying to establish that Islamic State because you're going to have a lot of Muslims that reject that. And when you have Muslims reject that, it's very difficult to spread that across the world. When you look at the United States, what the Muslim Brotherhood is doing right now in the US is they are establishing the foothold of what they will need to establish an Islamic rule inside of the United States. Now, the Muslim Brotherhood, and this is the problem I have, is the Muslim Brotherhood is very clear in what they want to do. They are not violently attacking anything. They are doing it by cultural revolution. They're doing it by migration. They are doing it by influencing the government. And every time the Trump administration says, okay, this organization and this organization and this organization inside the Muslim Brotherhood is banned, you're not solving the problem. All they're going to do is recreate that organization with a different name, doing the exact same thing, and continue to do what they need to do. You need to ban the Muslim Brotherhood as a whole, because that's a feeder organization for both Al Qaeda and the Islamic State. It is a fundraising organization for both. And as long as that is allowed to continue to operate, you have a major problem. The other day, we posted a map of how of where the Muslim Brotherhood exists in the entire world on our X platform. If you look at what the map itself, it will shock you how many countries they are involved in, both in the West and in the Muslim world.
Yeah, I appreciate the thorough explanation, Cleed. I just want to mention to our audience quickly that, as you all probably know, Cleed has had several, let's call them close calls on his life in recent months. And he's in a tenuous situation with the state of things right now in the Middle East. And that's why his camera's not on. There's nothing to identify where he's at or anything along those lines. But you'll get to see his pretty face again at some point in the not too distant future. So with that being said, Ted, I wanted to ask you, the CCP governance model, it's already exported all of this surveillance infrastructure that they have to over 80 countries. In a post-attack American political vacuum, how quickly could CCP-aligned governance tools be presented as solutions to domestic order problems? And I'm not saying that we turn the reins over to the CCP. I'm saying the tools that they use to basically control their populations. How quickly do you think that could potentially be turned on here in America?
Well, it's already here in America. They're in our communications. They're in our infrastructure. They're in our utilities. They can do that right now. What I see, and I spend a lot of time on China. I still speak on those policies. China is playing the long game. You know, they follow Sun Tzu: bide your time, hide your strength. Pretend to be weak when you're strong, and strong when you're weak. And so they are following a plan. And the best thing they could do is to inflame the discord in America, the divide that we're having, by using proxies, the Muslim Brotherhood, anybody that'll listen that they can use, the Soros's group, all these people to divide America, and let America fail on its own, and they'll come and pick up the pieces. You know, and I think that's why you're seeing them support Russia a little bit, and we're moving fleets over to the Middle East, because they know if we get into the Middle East, you're not just fighting Iran, because people are going to join, the Muslim nationalities versus Western Americans coming over there, and so that's going to degrade our military service, but our armament, all those things are going to go down, making us weaker. Keep in mind, we're $38 trillion in debt, spending $3 billion a day just on interest. And so Russia, all they have to do when things collapse here, and in your scenario of 25 attacks on different cities, strategically done, wait a few months, and they'll come in and pick up the pieces, and they have everything in place. The ZTE, Huawei, they've been in this country, and they have their own police force in here. New York City, they have it in Canada. And, that's something I talk a lot about, and people don't have a clue really what's going on. The pharmaceuticals, they control 30 to 100% of the pharmaceuticals we take, the OTC drugs over the counter, and the rare earth minerals. So all they're doing is waiting for the right time. They're biding their time, hiding their strength, and they'll come in. And I can't stress this enough, that people need to wake up. Instead of us fighting Republicans, Democrats, liberal, conservatives, or fighting over Epstein files, wake up, Congress, get your act together.
Yeah, I know insult intended, but good luck with that, right? I mean, it's a
Yeah,
bunch of
right.
political theater anymore. I don't take them too seriously myself. But Randy, question for you. When I described the different governance models, I purposely didn't cover Orthodox Christian tradition. And that segment, our segment, has historically produced the most resilient and freedom preserving social structures, especially under pressure. So, where do you think we fit in, that Orthodox Christian tradition, in this battle of civilizational models? And what does that mean for the American Christian preparedness community right now?
Well, that's a difficult question. You know, we are so far removed, like the way the government's functioning now and everything that we're doing, we're so far removed to what was intended or what was actually written down or what's actually constitutional. It's very hard to answer that question. If we went back to those governing principles, I think one, we would fit in just fine, because the reality is it's not supposed to match the rest of the world. And if it does, that means there's a problem. And that's why we're seeing what we see now. And I just think right now you have very few Christian churches, even in America, that actually preach the gospel and, promote biblical principles and kingdom principles. If they're, as I mentioned many times on this show, if you're in a church that's not speaking about the blood of Jesus, right, and the consequences of sin, then you're not in a church that's doing what it's supposed to do. And that is what our biggest problem is, because even we saw during COVID, when they locked down churches, I think historically, any other time in this country, any other decade, and certainly any other century, although we haven't been here that long, they wouldn't have stood for that. No one would have stood for that. The church would have stood up, pastors would have stood up, American citizens would have stood up and said, listen, if I can go to the bar and I can go buy pot, then I should be able to go to church and pray. So, I really think, where does it fit in with the world today? We don't, and we shouldn't. That's what Christianity is about. Jesus never fit into this world. And, in fact, he gave us that warning, and his example is what we have to go by. I mean, look what they did to that guy when he's the only man that's ever lived sinless on this planet, period.
Mm-hmm.
And, so we should not match. Where we fit in is where we should fit in under Christianity and following the principles of Jesus. That's where we should fit in. There is no fitting in with the rest of the world, and certainly with Europe or Russia or China. In Russia and China, I know in China for sure, but I'm pretty sure in Russia too, right? They don't want the Bible. They don't want you preaching or talking about Jesus or Christianity. And I know in China, they'll probably kill you, maybe even in Russia, but like several other countries in this world, go into an Islamic country and start preaching the Bible about Jesus and see what happens to you. Now, I'm not saying that in a bad way, but it's just the fact, it's the truth of the matter. If we went over and acted in their countries like they're acting in ours right now, they would cut our heads off right there in the street.
Yeah. And by the way, great job answering that question, Randy. I purposely gave you a couple open-ended ones like that, just so you could pick that ball up and run with it. So before we move into the third segment, Khalid, I'd like to hear your speculation or prediction on which of the four competing models that we've laid out is best positioned to win the post-attack consolidation battle in the United States, and why.
Well, your problem is threefold here. Number one, when you look at the Muslim world, you are not going to see a caliphate formed here. That's just not going to happen, because too many people in the Muslim world follow Western values while they are Muslim at the same time. Even if you look at a country like Pakistan, we have Christian churches. People are allowed to practice Christianity without any kind of recourse, without any kind of judgment. There's not a division of sorts in a country like Pakistan where people would think that would exist. When you look at a country like Afghanistan, where you already have Sharia law in place and women are subjected to violence and subjected to oppression, that model does not exist in a lot of countries. even Saudi Arabia, which was the model for most countries in understanding how Sharia law would follow, Saudi Arabia itself has softened its own image in being able to allow women to drive, women go to school, women have jobs. Prince Salman has really changed the way Saudi Arabia operates, and he's in the process of modernizing the Saudi people. The same thing exists in the UAE, the same thing exists in Qatar, the same thing exists in Bahrain, the same thing exists in Kuwait. So the mentality that the Muslim world will all bind together for a caliphate is inherently wrong. So you're going to have a lot of problems in the Muslim world from establishing that point of view. In the US, you have the Christian churches, you have the mosques. That's where I see most of the problem, because when you look at Europe and you look at the US, the number of illegal immigrants that have been allowed to move into those countries that hold radical extremist views and are waiting for the opportunity for something to go wrong that they can capitalize upon. That is where I'm going to see. That's where I see the biggest problem. That's why I believe that even though it's just 25 cities that are going to be targeted, the roll-on attacks that will happen will be massive. They will be on rural communities. They will be on individual people. It will be Christians attacking every Muslim, whether they are radicalized or not. It'll be Muslims rising up against Christians because Muslims are being attacked everywhere. Civil war is what's going to happen after 9/11 2.0, and there's no way to stop that. But my personal belief is the West will either espouse the Christian doctrine completely, or it will tear itself apart. And the biggest problem you have in the Western world is the mentality of the liberals. Their belief that there are more than two genders, that illegals should be allowed to have the same rights that citizens have, that you should have to give more to the people that don't deserve to be in your country. That is going to create a major issue. And I believe that the liberals are going to play the role of the useful idiot. They're going to be the first one shot. They're going to be the first people that are taken out of the game, but they will be the useful idiot that incites and ignites the fire that exists that will carry through the U.S. after 9/11 2.0.
I've forgotten how cheery you are, Clede, and how you bring us so much good news. You're just a ray of sunshine.
He's a rather jolly fellow.
Yeah,
when you get to know him.
there you go. So anybody who's been with us for any period of time knows that the Moon family are friends of mine. So the Moons are from Korea. They escaped North Korea and started the Washington Times in the early 1970s, one of the most conservative dead tree format papers out there. And the youngest son, Pastor Sean Moon, took a contingent of people from his church last year on this worldwide mission. And they went to Russia. And what's crazy, Ted, Randy and Jeff already know about this. So Sean is really tall. He's like 6'4". He wears a Make America Great Again hat, and he's filming these videos in subway stations in downtown Moscow, and nobody's even looking at him. Like a 6'4" Asian guy with a Make America Great. I asked him, I said, did anybody say anything? He said they didn't even look sideways at me, sort of thing. They went from there to Switzerland. He was in the middle of shooting a video in front of the WEF building, and he got assaulted by 4 goons that worked for the WEF and threw him off the property because they knew who he was. I'm going somewhere with this because Randy's mention of China. He tried to take his contingency into China. Not only were they refused entry to China, they were held for an extended period of time and then dumped back into Taiwan. And that's a year ago, and he's still in Taiwan to this point in time. Randy, you couldn't have hit the nail more on the head. If you're a Christian mission and you go to China, that's the type of greeting you could expect. It's freaking brutal for sure. But let's pivot and move into segment number 3. Awesome answers tonight from everybody, by the way. So the information warfare battle that begins at hour 1. So within hours of the first explosions, the narrative war begins. Every competing power model floods the information space with its version of what happened, who's responsible, and what the solution looks like. And the population that cannot triangulate between sources will consume whoever controls the dominant platform. The CCP-aligned technocratic model has spent years investing in narrative infrastructure through social media algorithm influence, platform ownership positions, and domestic media dependency, meaning the post-attack information environment is already partially pre-positioned against American truth-telling. An armed, spiritually grounded, and informationally sovereign American populace is the single most disruptive element to every authoritarian post-attack narrative, which is why censorship infrastructure is always the first thing consolidated in a real crisis. So, Ted, I'm going to come to you first on this one. We've already seen platform level censorship during Charlie 19. And I have to say Charlie 19 because we keep getting slapped with the strikes. One more strike on our big YouTube channel. Poof, gone, deplatformed again. Anyway, as well as the 2024 election cycle, in the context of a 25 city coordinated attack, what does government directed information control look like? And how fast does it activate as far as Washington, D.C. and all of the, let's say the messengers? How long does it take to push the button to go and start spreading whatever they want to spread?
Well, I think we've seen that with COVID. I think what you're going to see is when that happens, there's going to be this come together message. We're all together on the same page, but then you have to look at the division in the country. The division we have now is being flamed by the legacy media and other nefarious actors. And, when Fauci was in there and the Biden administration, with the help of Obama, the message coming out was follow government. Government is going to treat you right, 6 feet apart, get vaccinated, do all these things. In this kind of a situation, the people, like you said, that can't triangulate the different sources of information, they're going to fall into that and they're going to follow the marching orders. And that's where it's real dangerous if people aren't prepared and have other forms of communication and getting that information. I think we're at an all-time high of lack of trust in our government. And as something like that were to come out, I think you're going to just see a breakdown of society. And I think, initially you're going to go into tribalism in the small communities. And as they kind of get settled, you're going to start developing communities. But China will do whatever they can to break this down. And if they're going to use the Muslims to start this, they'll use them for a while, but then they'll treat them like they treat the Uyghurs, because they cannot have any higher power than the Chinese Communist Party. And if it's not our government doing it, then it's going to be somebody like China doing it, pretending to be the U.S. government.
Man, you're about as cheery as Khalid is here, but
This is my happy face.
I will, which I asked you before we went live. Where's your roll of duct tape? I mean, if you're going to dress up like red green, you got to have duct tape, man. So you actually did a great job of setting Randy up for the next question. And Randy was an Echo as a Green Beret at one point in time in his team, Ted. So he's, the communications guy. Randy, if cellular networks and the internet routing goes down in the immediate aftermath of an attack, and I'm not talking worldwide, not even countrywide, but in pockets, what are the realistic alternative information channels that average Americans should already have access to, and which of them, in your opinion, are the most resilient?
Well, honestly, I couldn't tell you right now what would be the best information channels, right? I honestly, I'm just being honest, but because most of that stuff is going to be government issued stuff, and you know where I'm at with the government. Whatever they're putting out this day and time, I'm just even under the Trump administration to a certain degree, because we know there's all kinds of these federal agencies and all levels of the government that still have plenty of people that are anti-Trumpers, and they're still on their little mission, regardless if the administration changed hands or not. And so, if electric goes down and the internet goes down, it's going to be very hard to communicate. And if you don't have radios, like a ham radio or radios that actually use frequencies, CBs, you're not going to be able to communicate. And even then, you're going to need the power. Now, some of those radios won't really need a whole lot of power, but you still got to have some power. So it's why I always go back to saying the hand crank. And I know we've had some comments lately about that, because no, hand cranks are not the best radio systems. But what they are is your last resort of getting some sort of information if there is no other way for you to connect to get information. Because guess what? When the internet goes down and the electricity goes down, the news won't be on every night. And so you're not going to be able to get any information if you're not able to connect whatever network is still up. And then that's going to depend on how bad the electricity is. I mean, the downing of it, how long it takes for it to come back. And, and of course, even without the internet now, there's a lot of stuff that runs through the internet. That's going to make a significant dent in communications. And in fact, internet's become more important than actually having cable on your TV for your average household. So, and then again, most people now are getting their news from X or from social media on some level. It's the truth of the matter, because it's the things that come out first, just like Nick Shirley, right? Those types of things are what's actually telling the truth today, when the rest of the stuff is so compromised. The only thing I would trust is the magazine stuff you have that you bought with Survival Dispatch, whatever it is that comes with all the Guardian stuff, the 30 different magazines with all that information. That's probably what you should lean on, that kind of stuff, and survival stuff. Trying to rely on whatever the government or an information channel is putting out after this happens would be like listening to FEMA.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Randy. So what Randy's referring to, when I acquired this company, the previous owner spent over $1 million in payroll to produce 37 e-magazines called the Survival Dispatch Insider. And they cover every single imaginable survival prepping topic in depth. And when you sign up as a Survival Dispatch Guardian, you get all of them for free. We used to charge $9.99 a piece. I give them away to everybody who signs up, whether it's a $9.99 a month membership, a $99.99 a year annual, doesn't matter. It's one of the value adds, one of the perks that you get. But I want to ruminate on this for a second with both Khalid and Ted with regards to Randy's answer there. So I'd like to hear your thoughts, Khalid, on the channel aspect. So let me just reread the question. If cellular networks and internet routing go down in the immediate aftermath of an attack, what are the realistic alternative information channels that average Americans should already have access to? Which of them is the most resilient? And then, no offense intended, you've mentioned it yourself, Pakistan is a third world country. I'd like to know what role the rumor mill plays when this type of scenario unfolds, where you have, massive comms outages, the power grid goes down. How does the rumor mill affect the post-attack landscape, Khalid?
Well, let's start with the rumor mill. Because in Pakistan, we have seen political riots, we have seen terrorist attacks. One of the key things that the government has done here is when you look at what happens if you remember, X was banned in Pakistan for well over 2 years when the new government came into power, because there was so much anti-government propaganda being put out on X that the government decided that X should not be available to Pakistanis. So we all literally had to install VPNs just to use X. Now, X was open, and this is very interesting. X was reactivated in Pakistan in May, literally the day Pakistan and India went to war. X was turned on, and everyone was allowed to go back on X and support the country, support the war, support the fight, put out information. So we've seen how this model works when it comes to censorship. Pakistan's in the process right now of installing the Chinese firewall. The Chinese firewall, for those who aren't aware of how that works, the firewall literally blocks every bit of information that comes in and goes out. So the government literally takes control of everything that goes out. In Pakistan, they passed a law that whatever you do on WhatsApp, whether you're sending text messages, pictures, voice messages, having a phone call, that is recorded and stored on a server inside a government building. So that if tomorrow they need to use it against you, even though you've deleted it from your X, from your WhatsApp, they have a recording, they have a copy of it, so they can use it against you. we've seen how authoritative governments operate when it comes to what's happened in Pakistan. We literally have the former prime minister of Pakistan sitting in a jail from the past 2 years because the government has framed charges against him and locked him up. So it's not that we don't know how authoritarian governments work on this side of the world. What will happen in the US? Cell networks will be allowed to operate for a certain amount of time because the government will try and use cell networks to distribute messages to the people of the United States while this attack is going on. Because the EMS system, a lot of people are not familiar with, they're not going to trust, they're not going to believe. So they'll allow the internet to continue running so that people in different places can talk about what's going on. Now, it's a two-pronged, so it's a two-sided sword for you. It's a double-edged sword. On one side, you'll see a lot of anti-government propaganda put out when a terrorist attack, but you'll also get a lot of information of what's going on. So it'll be helpful and negative. At some point, the internet and cell networks will be shut off because the government will lose control of that.
Right.
It will be shut off. The network will be gone. Propaganda will disappear. And what you'll see is a government channel appear across all of your networks, ABC, NBC, CBS. Those will be only networks operating, and they will be reading a government script. The reason I say that is if you look at the most watched channel in the US right now, it's Netflix. And if you look at the content that Netflix is generating, it is purely against the fabric of the United States. They will want that to disappear, and they'll want it to disappear very quickly.
Yeah, great answer, by the way. So, Ted, let's kind of take this in a little bit of a different direction.
Sure.
So, Russia's GRU and China's MSS have both been documented running active narrative warfare operations inside U.S. domestic information platforms. In the chaos of a post 9/11 2.0 environment, how do their influence operations interact with each other and with the domestic crisis? Like, are they joined at the hip behind the scenes, or is it some level of collaboration on their part, in your opinion? And again, how would that play out as far as our infrastructure is concerned here?
Well, I think what you'll see is China and Russia work hand in hand, but keep in mind, China views themselves as the dominant species on the planet. And so they'll use Russia as long as they can. They may use them for a police force to keep people in check, but they're not going to trust them long term. And so what you'll see is as that happens, you're going to have China's already infiltrated, as I said, through so much of our infrastructure and our utilities that all they have to do is hit the switch and they can control the narrative. And if they control the narrative, they're going to direct people every which way. And we already see what Russia has done in Africa, with the Wagner group. Of course, we saw what Putin did with the head of that, I forget his name. So China will use Russia mercenary or their military, the GRU, to control people as long as it's getting China to their level. And they're always going to need some kind of a police force. It's interesting in the Solomon Islands, the COFA pact that we had with them, Solomon Islands didn't like it. They're in the third chain of islands, and they moved 100% to China. Now, China has military police in the Solomon Islands arresting people from Solomon. And that's what will happen here. You're going to have that kind of a force. The potential is here. And the thing that's standing in the way, as we brought up, are there going to be the Christian nationals in this country? And I don't want to frame that because the media would say, oh, he's a Christian nationalist. I'm a Christian and I believe in nationalism. The patriots, I'll say. And, it's going to be a sad day if that happens, and we need to be prepared for it.
Yeah, not good prospects at all. Randy, coming back to you, this term disinformation has been weaponized to silence accurate reporting about threats the establishment doesn't want discussed. How does the preparedness community maintain credibility as a truth-telling, channel, for lack of a better term, when the information warfare is happening all around us?
Well, one of the things is, you'll have to be careful about, what information you push out once that starts, because
Mhm.
if you push out a couple of false stories or, something even worse, your credibility is gone right there. It takes once you lose credibility, it doesn't matter what organization, what segment of society, when you lose credibility, it's been proven historically that's very, very hard to gain that credibility back. Like, it takes a long time if you ever do it. And, then it's also got to be the information that it's provided for such said events has to be legitimate. People have to be able to use the information that we provide or any survival network provides to actually be successful in whatever they do next. It's just like the show Alone, right? When they go out there and they test their survival skills, the people that are better at it survive longer out there. And it's not easy because, we're all fat and lazy today is the truth of the matter.
Yeah.
And if we didn't have 7-Eleven and McDonald's in every corner, if we actually had to go back to the 13, 14, or 1500s where there's not all this stuff and we had to go out and grow and hunt and all that kind of thing, think of how many people would die very quickly because we just don't have those skills anymore. And that's part of what prepping puts out. Like, what do you do if there's no power, and certainly for an extended period of time? How do you, protect your food? How do you store it? What do you do with water? So all that information has to be correct and it has to help people, because once things go wrong, if the information that was put out doesn't work, or again, like when all these stories start coming out, because as you mentioned, so here's the reality, right? It's all our intelligence agencies that made those terms up. It started with conspiracy theorists when John F. Kennedy was killed. They needed to have a way to discredit anybody that was going against the narrative. So that's how it became. And then since September 11th, right? And certainly since the Obama years, we've seen a lot of this misinformation. What's the other one? Misinformation. But we've seen these terms pop up. These are all made up terms. They didn't even exist before. There was no such thing. But what they're being used is it's verbiage being used to silence a particular segment of the society. And those are the ones that are doing the questioning of what's going on, or what is this about, or they're wanting the why, and what's the what undergirds this to make it legal, that kind of stuff. Or when you question the narrative, we've seen it since September 11th. We definitely saw it during the Summer of Love and during the Charlie 19 event, and all the way through the Biden years. We've seen all this stuff, and that's what it comes from. And again, they're just made up terms, people. Misinformation or disinformation, that's the other one. Those aren't real terms. They're made up, and really, you're either telling the truth or you're lying. That's it. Those are the
misinformation, disinformation, malinformation would be the three that come to mind for me. And I couldn't agree more. So since we switched to this new format, we typically try to wrap up the main topic at the top of the hour. But with the three of y'all on here tonight, with just a wealth of perspective on this, I've got one more question for Cleet on segment number 3, and then we still have 2 more segments to go. So what I'll do is I'll shrink up the sit rep at the end, because this is just a great conversation that we're having here. Khalid, ISIS and its affiliates have been running a sophisticated global propaganda operation now for well over a decade. In a multi-city attack scenario, what does their post-attack messaging look like, and who's it specifically targeting inside the United States?
Well, let's look at how these terrorist groups have matured in the way they use propaganda. What we always saw from Al Qaeda was that whenever an attack happened, Bin Laden would come on camera, he'd record a video praising his attack, talking about how the success that it carried out, inciting people to join Al Qaeda, and that would be delivered to Al Jazeera, and Al Jazeera would broadcast it. So that was the old way of doing things. What ISIS has been able to do, and it's not ISIS, it's ISKP, Islamic State Khorasan province, that it's based in Afghanistan. They have been able to completely change the game. You have got literally commercial level magazines being put out in, I think it's 10 languages now. You have videos being produced that are Hollywood quality trailers that are being used to recruit. You have got training materials that are being put out on different on different encrypted networks that are being used to radicalize people much faster and indoctrinate people much faster than what they were able to do in the past. What you'll see after the 9/11 2.0 attacks is you will see ISIS videos being spread far and wide on social media networks, talking about how weak the government was to not be able to defend people, talking about how the government was so easily collapsed, talking about the disunity amongst the American people, and using that to recruit people into ISIS itself. Now, one other thing that Randy didn't touch on, when you talk about disinformation and malinformation, you also have to talk about deep fakes and bots, which plague our social media networks. When you look at deep fakes, you are able to create a video of something that never really happened and make people believe it because it gets spread far and wide. Again, going back to the old adage, a lie gets around the world much before the truth even puts on its shoes. So when those videos start to go out and they were never said, they were never done, it never happened that way, but AI allows you to do it, and you create a deep fake and you put it out that, look, this kind of an attack was carried out, this many people were beheaded, it may have never happened, but they've indoctrinated it and they've used it as propaganda against you. One thing that ISIS is very good at, is embedding their own fighters inside of civilian populations. So when the military strikes, they kill numerous civilians, and those videos are used to recruit. When they carry out these attacks in the US, they will be using those videos to show the weakness of the US, the weakness of the US military, the weakness of the US government, and using those videos to indoctrinate people into what is the Islamic State. We've seen it happen. If you remember back when ISIL started, when it was ISIL in Iraq, they were recruiting people from Europe, and people from Europe were leaving good lives and coming to join ISIS to fight with them. You saw women leaving their homes and coming to become ISIS brides. Their level of being able to indoctrinate people is unbelievable. When you look at what's going on in Europe during the French Olympics, and during the German Champions League, we were working with both intelligence agencies, and we were showing them videos being spread through Sweden, through Italy, through other countries in Europe that were indoctrinating people to carry out lone wolf attacks. So ISIS has literally changed the model of propaganda. Al Qaeda cannot get to that level, so they will use ISIS to do. And in that process, they'll be able to bring more and more people into the jihadi community.
Yeah, great answer to close out segment number 3. So before we go into segment number 4, a quick shout out for our premier sponsor, Carnival, carnival.com. I put a link in the live chat directly to the Prep Builder subscription. It's only $159 a month, but you lock in your price for 12 months straight on premium American meat, no mRNA, no antibiotics, no histamines, none of that crap. And you'll notice right here where my cursor is, if you sign up for a Carnival subscription, you get a completely free Survival Dispatch Guardians membership, comes with it at no extra charge. So that's $100 a year membership that you get for free when you sign up with them. And then I also want to mention our good friends at wasatchwagyu.com, the best jerky in the world, bar none. Y'all have heard me go on about this over and over again. I make sandwiches from it. My wife puts it on charcuterie boards. You can't beat it with a stick. I put a link for this in the live chat, discount code SD25 to take advantage of that. So with that being said, let's go directly into segment number 4, community defense doctrine, the asymmetric advantage of the armed American. The armed, organized, and spiritually coherent American community is the single most powerful asymmetric disruption to every authoritarian consolidation model in play, because none of those models, technocracy, golly, tongue twister, radical Islamic State or regional warlord bloc, can consolidate permanent control over a well-armed, decentralized, and community organized civilian population. Christian communities built around genuine accountability, mutual service, and shared purpose have the deepest historical track record of resilience under exactly this kind of civilizational pressure, not because of politics, but because the organizing principle transcends the crisis itself. Community defense is not just about weapons, it's about pre-established relationships, communication redundancy, shared resource networks, and a common moral framework that holds when systems fail. So let me get the group back up on stage here. It looks like we have the ghost of Ted back there twice. So let me get him back on again. Can you hear us, Ted? Ted, can you hear us? I would exit and come back in again, Ted, and that'll fix it. So I'm going to come straight to you, Randy. From a special forces doctrine perspective, what does an organized American community defense structure look like at the neighborhood and county level? And what capabilities are both realistic and legally achievable before an event like this breaks out?
Well, it's no different than, if you're doing, you have basically it's your network, right? And so what that looks like is, you have other people that you can lean on. Basically, it's going to be what you're going to call your structure. If you don't have that, right, when something like this happens, it's no different than the same saying, right? More eyes and brains looking at it are better than just one pair, right? Or one brain trying to work over this. So really it's also having a network where you can lend to help each other out, because it's going to take support. No one's going to be able to go it alone. So just having a few friends that you can depend on, that you can each depend on, will make a huge difference in how this goes and what the turnout may be, or the outcome may end up being for you and your family. And really that's whether it's, and moving out into the county, that may be a little more difficult. You think about spreading that out, that would be farther. That's going to take longer unless you already have somewhat of a network built out that's fairly large. But we're talking about neighborhoods, man. And so what you're going to be able to do is stick together, right? Stick together to help defend each other's homes and your neighborhood, to keep, mobs from coming in and stealing everything y'all have out of your homes, and or worse. So I think that's really the biggest piece. I mean, there's all kinds of things that come off of that too, but the biggest piece will be having other people you can depend on, so that y'all can all help yourselves defend each other and your homes and your families.
And again, you guys are on fire tonight. Great answer. Let me get Ted back on stage here and double check. Can you hear us, Ted?
I can hear you. I keep getting bumped off. Anyways, I hear you. I hear you fine.
Okay, perfect. So I'll go to you next, and then Cleet on this. So the asymmetric advantage of a distributed armed population is well documented in both historical and modern insurgency analysis. How does that advantage translate into the specific context of a post-attack American environment where federal order may be degraded, perhaps virtually non-existent in some parts of the country?
I think that's the most important thing, is to be prepared. You look at the Patriots when the Revolutionary War broke out, how they clung together, how they came together. I don't want to say clung because it sounds like Hillary Clinton. How they came together, and they formed those communities and they fought back. And that's what I think we got to rely on, is self-reliance. And you look at the population today, of how many people could do that. With the Revolutionary War, I think they said there was 10 to 15% of the population that thought it was a good idea. Anyways, those were the ones that were moved the Revolutionary War forward. And I think that's what we're going to have to rely on, is the people that are prepared, that believe in the constitutional principles of a constitutional republic, and move that forward. And the resilience that we can bring to the table. We're not going to rely on FEMA or the government. And you were talking about communications earlier. whatever communication device you have that's modern, more than likely it's made in China. And if it's made in China, they have a back door in that. And I think the communications that we're going to have outside of just within a community is going to be the shortwave radios or the ham operators. And it would probably be pre 1980 or 1990 models that we have to use to come together. I don't know if I got all your question, but I'll stop there.
No, that was great. So I would like to mention, because comms is deep in my wheelhouse. I'm reaching here blind on my left side looking for something here, but that's one of the reasons that I paid the big money for a business class license. So I've got 5 dedicated frequencies / channels for a 50-mile radius from the FCC. It costs about $500. And then I've got Motorola business class radios. These are special radios. There's a mobile one sitting beside me I use as a base station. These are typically like 10 times the price of a Chinese radio that you would buy on Amazon. It's the only way you can legally have encrypted comms over the air as a civilian, number one. Number two, these are the only radios that civilians can have that do what's called channel hopping. So if you had a radio there and I had one here and we were talking, every second the radios would switch between those 5 channels 3 times per second. So even if somebody cracked the encryption protocol, they still wouldn't be able to understand what we're saying. So here's the deal, though. I can tell you for a fact, because I've seen it firsthand, the NSA can listen to everything that you say on these radios. Now, the radios that Randy used when he was deployed that are $18,000 to $20,000 for a handheld that's about double this size, they're called Harris, is the brand. They channel hop 100 channels per second. And yeah, there's very few people who could even chew on those types of numbers at that type of scale. But Ted, you hit the nail on the head as far as embedded, Chinese systems. Khalid, coming to you, what do you reckon the most common failures are in community preparedness planning that you've seen even amongst highly motivated people, preparedness groups, and how do those failures compound under the pressure and the stress of a mass casualty event?
Well, the biggest problem you're going to have is everybody wants to be a leader. Everybody wants to be the big dog when shit hits the fan. And getting people to understand that you may think you can be a leader, but actually being the leader of a community group, a militia, a mutual assistance group, a protection force, requires a different level of understanding, a different level of mental thinking that not everyone has. So the first problem you're going to have is in the leadership level, because everyone's going to want to lead. I have the most friends, I brought the most people, so I should lead. I have the most goods, so I should lead. No one looks at the fact that if you don't have the understanding of how to operate in that kind of an environment, you don't have the ability to lead. That's the first problem. And we had this question in one of our element chats about how we could run a militia. Because I've run a militia myself, because I run strike teams myself, I have seen it firsthand when we have people that start to get a little bit too full of themselves, where the ego gets too strong, and they start saying, well, I'm going to lead. I know better. I can do this better. That ends up leading to failure. And in a situation where you have mass casualty events, it means you're going to lose a lot of people in the process as well. So when you start building mutual assistance groups, when you start building militias, when you start building community protection groups, the first thing you need to do is establish leadership. Once you establish leadership, then you need to establish a chain of command. Because once you have that chain of command in place, then you've protected not only your community, but the communities that surround you as well. That means your influence, your strength, your power increases and moves throughout the area. That keeps building and building and building. That doesn't mean that you have one leader for the entire city. You can have 3 or 4 leaders for the entire city. But each person needs to make sure that they can select people, and this is very difficult, that they can select people that, number one, they can trust, Number two, they have the experience. And number three, they can step up and make the tough decisions at the right time. These are the things that you need to be looking at when you're looking at how you protect your community after a mass casualty event. It's very difficult to do that in peacetime, because in peacetime everyone has great ideas and everyone knows what they want to do. When the bullets start to fly, that's when you find out who has the guts to stand up, who has the guts to lead, and who you need to move backwards and say, listen, let me run the show. You can help, I'll take your advice, but let me lead.
Yeah, and spoken directly from the trenches there. So, Randy, back on the topic of faith. So, faith-based communities have historically been the backbone of mutual aid, moral coherence, and recovery under disaster conditions. How do pastors, church elders, and faith leaders operationalize that role before the crisis rather than being reactive after the crisis?
Well, I think what you're asking is, typically, historically, certainly what we've seen in this country with Christian churches is, whether they're feeding the poor, the homeless, or whatever, they've been through this many times. So they're kind of proactive about, like I remember one of the churches I was in built when I was in Tampa. What was it? And it was I want to say there was some sort of floods or that, but built a trailer, right, where they could go out and help serve that community. Those people could come in and take a shower and that kind of thing. And so they preemptively put things in, because there's one thing that Christians are aware of, that, tough times are coming again. You're either in the church, you're either, you're either coming out of a problem, or you're in the problem, you just came out of the problem, or you're just about to enter the problem. So that's kind of the way it goes. As we know, life does this. And the same thing we see in history, and it's no different than what we're watching now. And churches have been there, certainly longer than this country's been around. So they always prepare for what a rainy day will say, to speak, right? That's what everybody used to say back in the day. You save your money and this and that, or you prepare for a rainy day. What they meant for was the next trial or tribulation that was going to come along that either affected you personally or everybody as a whole. We do have events that affect the entire globe. We certainly have them that affect nations, and we have even more so that affect your neighborhood and community down to your family. But that's why historically you could see the churches preemptively get ready for that kind of stuff, because we know it's coming. There is no stopping that. Once we got kicked out of the garden, life was never meant to be easy. It was meant to be a struggle. So one of the things Christians have always been good at is preparing for that next struggle.
Well said, Randy. So, Ted, you get final word on segment number 4. I've asked this question of Randy and Cleve multiple times in the past, so it'll be interesting to hear your take on this. So, if a community was starting from scratch today, what are the 3 most critical non-weapon investments they should make in the next 90 days to build genuine resilience against a 9/11 2.0 scenario? And that's if it doesn't happen in the next 90 days, which there's a high probability it will happen with the attack window now being open.
I think the most important thing is you got to look at the amount of damage. And obviously, you're going to start, you need basics in life, food and water. And then you need some form of law or structure. And then you build from there. You build into what's a trade model? What are we going to use for exchange? Because there are going to be people that are out there. They're going to want to come in you, and you're going to have security, some way to protect your family, your community, and build from that. But then you start rebuilding. You got to have your faith-based leaders in there, because that's the thing that's going to really unite people together and hold that together. And God forbid we ever see that, but we're probably closer to that in our lifetime than we've been in 200 years since the beginning of the country. It's a whole different game out there. And so people need to prepare for the basics. My wife and I, we live on a river because we wanted fresh water. We got a way to filter that. We've got ways to communicate with our family. And you just start from the basics and build up there, and you find like-minded people, and you build a community out of that, and keep the faith. Our country's been through trials and tribulations and world wars, but it's the system that has lived beyond that, through all that, I should say, not beyond that. And you got to have the faith.
Yeah, excellent answer, by the way. I knew you'd do well with that. So,
Thank you.
and by the way, Randy, somebody right here, let me see. I think it was Mike. Let me see if I can find it. Randy speaks from the heart. You can tell. Good job, brother. So nice compliment for you there, Randy.
Thank you, all you guys. When I see them, I give you a little, if I'm on the screen, I'll give you a little salute like that. I really appreciate y'all's support. Thank you.
Yeah, that's awesome. So let's move into the fifth and final segment for the main topic tonight. Which civilization wins and what you must do before the outcome is decided. So the civilization that wins the next century will be built from what its people were doing before the crisis hit, not from what they scrambled to assemble in the aftermath, which means the preparation window is right now, not after the first explosion. Financial, informational, and physical sovereignty are the three pillars of freedom under civilizational pressure. Every move toward debt reduction, tangible asset holding, communication redundancy, and defensive capability is a vote cast against the authoritarian model before it arrives. The outcome of the coming civilizational battle will not be determined by governments, militaries, or intelligence agencies alone. It will be determined by whether a sufficient mass of free, faithful, armed, and prepared Americans choose to hold the line when every instinct in a terrified society is screaming to hand over control in exchange for safety. So I'm coming right back to you, Randy, because I had a special question just for you, and then I'll hit Khalid after that. So from an intelligence analysis perspective, Randy, what does the threshold look like? In other words, how many prepared and organized Americans does it actually take to tip the post-attack civilizational balance towards liberty rather than authoritarian consolidation? And I'll preface it by saying, every time I hear somebody pose a question like this, I always think of the 3% of the colonists who threw the tea in the harbor and gave the King of England a big FU. But I don't know if 3% is enough to sway something this big.
Well, I like a lot of the answers Ted gave tonight, right? Seriously, he served in Congress, and I see why he's not still there. Because a lot of the stuff he said, we've already mentioned many times on the show. And I will just say that, I just lost. What was the question again? I'm sorry.
So what does the threshold look like? In other words, how many prepared and organized Americans?
That's right. So I also go back into what you just mentioned. 3% started it, right? And then what do I talk about all the time? The herd mentality, right? One of the things that Ted said earlier was about the 15% or the 13, right, that probably served during that. And they're the ones that pushed it over. And what occurred to me was the herd mentality, right? Because it's what we're looking at, right? 85% of people will keep the blinders on and keep shuffling forward no matter what happens. And they pray, regardless if they believe in it or not, they pray that everything's going to work out for the best. And so you have 10% that's upset about it, but they look around and most everybody else is not doing anything else about it, right? So they just shuffle along. There's only 5% that'll get up and do or say anything about it. And it's why we've watched over the last 20 years that 5% get crushed by the media and the establishment. I mean, just look at the people that want to keep their businesses open during 2020, crushed. And so that's why you see that, because that's a message to the other 95%. What occurred to me is that our 5%, which we're part of, all we need to do is convince the 10% that's looking around to see most everybody's not doing it. All we need to do is get them on our side and moving with us. And I think it's no different then, because if we go back, and again, we will have to have God on our side, because, our forefathers, although today many people, and certainly the politicians and academia and the media will try to tell, well, they weren't really Christians. They were, which is not true. It's so, and we know it's not true because back then they wrote letters by their hand for communication, and we have those letters. So we know exactly what they thought. And the fact is, they knew without a shadow of a doubt that God was on their side and that he was actually helping them win the war. Because otherwise, there is no good reason why our little ragtag little army with no nothing, no supplies, no money, was able to defeat the British Army and Navy, which owned the world at that time. That's how strong and powerful they were. And so if we didn't have God on our side, the forefathers told us, they know this. If God wasn't helping them, and we've gone long enough where I could go on the stories they mentioned of how we know for certain, with a certainty, that God was helping us defeat the British and become a country of our own. And that is the truth of the matter. So we probably only need 15% of the population to get up and actually do something about it to reverse this course. Again, with God on our side. If we don't repent and we don't pray and ask God for help and help us do this, it's not going to happen.
Well, yeah, great points, Randy. I would argue that probably one of the most significant watershed events in the past, let's say 50 years, has been the elimination of God from everything. No morning prayer in the school, shopping, all the shopping open on Sundays. Like the Sunday when we grew up, that was a day for family, right? We always drove to my grandparents 50 miles away and had dinner with them every Sunday and had the tremendous pleasure of watching Lawrence Welk every Sunday night after football. So, and for the youngins out there, just have a look up on Lawrence Welk. You'll see what I'm talking about. Khalid, coming to you. What's the single most underestimated threat to American liberty in the post-attack environment? The external actors executing the attack, the internal governance models waiting to exploit it, or the information environment that shapes how the population responds? And I'm going to go out on a limb, and you're fixing to say all of the above.
Well, let's start with the basic thing. If we look at what's been happening over the past few years, technology's taken over the government. And we've seen how technology's taken over the government in China with surveillance models, being able to understand, being able to pick people off by the way they walk, by the way they talk. That's the first problem we've got, is what technology is going to do once these attacks happen. Secondly, when you look at how the people are going to react, and I agree with Randy here, that you've got so many people that are going to sit on the sidelines and go, well, it's just going to last for some portion of time, and things will get better, and they won't get involved in the fight, and that's going to end up costing them their lives. This is one of those events that is not exclusive to anyone. This is an inclusive event for the entire United States, and if the people of the U.S. do not stand together, they are not going to win. You're going to end up losing your country, and even if it means fracturing the U.S. into pieces, it still means losing. So my biggest problem is that there is not one single thing you can point at, because there are too many factors at play that will break things up, and we're already seeing it happen. When you look at Trump derangement syndrome, you have literally people that will not even acknowledge the good things that Donald Trump does, just because they don't like Donald Trump. And we've never seen that in the US before. Even with Biden and Obama and with Bush and with Reagan, and even Jimmy Carter, who was, for lack of a better word, very laid back in the way he ran his presidency. We've never seen so much division inside the United States as we see right now. And that is something that allows people to exploit and create groups, create options, create reasons to attack. Now, I agree with Randy on this point, that until you get back to faith, until you get back to God, you are not going to be able to come together, because God is a uniting force. That takes away the liberal, that takes away the conservative, that takes away the Republican, that takes away the Democrat, because it's a belief in God that brings you all together to stand together. And that faith in God will give you victory. The problem that we're going to see is when you look at faith, you have so many people that will manipulate faith that we've seen on our side, on our side of the world, where people will use faith to manipulate people into doing things they would not normally do. So we have to be very careful when these attacks start. It's not a singular thing we need to look at. The first thing that everyone needs to do is come back to God. And when you come back to God, you need to come back to God, and you need to come back to the God of the Bible, not the God of the pastor, not the God of the church you attend. The God of the Bible will give you the faith to be able to win the battle you're facing as a community. And if you don't do that, you're going to lose anyway.
Very, very well said, Clete. Very well said. So coming back to you, Ted, the founders built this republic with an explicit understanding that self-governance requires a virtuous and informed citizenry. In the current landscape, how close are we to the critical mass of informed preparedness needed to defend the original design under civilizational pressure? So similar to a question I asked you earlier, but this time put a number on it, like a percentage of people who are actually, let's say, tracking this.
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's one I kind of ponder all the time. How many people would show up? Whenever you have a movement like that, um, I'm not talking about a movement, just that kind of a movement in a society. There's going to be a certain percentage, and reading history, 15 to 30, less than 30% of the people believed in the Revolutionary War. There was that side that sat on the sideline and said, yeah, I could go either way. And then there was that side that was leaning towards Britain or the British. And thank God for those people that had the faith, that were willing to stand up for liberties and freedoms. Which reminds me, and I got to bring this book in. I don't know if I've mentioned this book to you before. The Miracle of Freedom, the 7 turning points or tipping points that saved the world, by Chris and his brother Ted Stewart. Chris served in the Air Force. I served with him. A great guy, award-winning bestseller author. In that book, they look at different battles and events in the world that were really tipping points that moved the next generation or the next century forward. And the anthropologists and people that study that stuff came up with a number. There were 100 billion people that they came up, best estimate, that have ever lived on planet Earth since the beginning of time. 100 billion people. Out of that, only 4.5%, which would be 4.5 billion people, have ever lived in the liberties and freedoms we have today. The amazing thing is 80% of us are alive. That's how fleeting liberties and freedoms are. That is what is on the line as we're going through this tectonic shift in the world order, world power. And so how many people does it take to save it? It takes one that is willing to stand up, that inspires the next one next to them. And it goes back to your beliefs. And Randy, you were talking about how our founders believed in a higher power, and I know you probably have heard the story of Ben Franklin, who started off as an atheist and became a deist, believing in a higher power. When they're in the Constitutional Convention, the Constitutional Hall in Philadelphia, everybody's arguing back and forth, and he had become an old man, and he was pounding his cane, his walking stick on the floor, and everybody got quiet. And he says, how's it come to be that we used to open every session with a prayer, asking for guidance from above to get us through the Revolutionary War, and here we sit squabbling? He goes, I have learned, I have become an old man, and I have learned that God does intervene in the affairs of man. For if he knows when a sparrow falls from a tree, does he not know, how to, that he is in our lives? And so, as you said, they knew there was somebody as a higher power. And it's that kind of leadership, that kind of inspiration, that kind of Christian beliefs that is going to inspire the next people and give them belief, and you build from that. And so who wins is the one that believes and has that belief in a higher power in God, and then we can move forward.
Again, another great answer. Let me get all y'all up on another stage here quickly, because I wanted to show this. I'm assuming this is the correct.
Yeah, great book.
Okay. So I'm going to put a link to that in the live chat right now for y'all. And
I'm going
ironic.
to have to sign out and come back in.
Ted lost his sound again. This is one of the few times I've ever seen a hardcover book on Amazon, less than a softcover book. Very interesting. So let me go back to our main stage here. And Randy, I'm going to come to you with the final say on the fifth and final segment, and then we'll get into the practical payoff where everybody can chime in. Let's see if we can get Ted on stage here. Can you hear us, Ted?
I'm back.
Can you hear us?
Yes, sir.
All right, perfect.
All right.
So I'm going to give Randy the closing question for segment number 5, and then we're going to go to the practical payoff where all three of you will be able to weigh in. So, Randy, my question for you is, from a practical standpoint, what does the first 72 hours look like for a prepared Christian American family in a city that wasn't hit? I've never asked any panelists this. We've always focused on the cities being hit, but we have to expect that cities that aren't directly hit are probably going to see supply disruptions, potential comms breakdowns, and potential, social disorder. So take a swing at that one. You're the first person who gets to answer that question.
So what you're wanting to know is, what does it look like for a Christian family in a city that's not hit the first 72 hours, right? So I think first, that they'll probably go into some prayer, which is what's required, and I think is what we're told to do to start with. But I think that, then over that 72 hours, providing they have power and internet still, then it's time. I think that's when you start pulling things in closer together, right? Because as you mentioned, even though their city wasn't directly hit, it will be affected by these attacks with the supply chains when they kill the power and when they kill the internet. So that's going to affect us all. And it doesn't matter if you're in a city that's hit or not. Now, the city that's hit, obviously, they're going to have some additional challenges. But we'll say that first Christian family, first 72 hours, they're probably going to figure out if they're going to go somewhere, where that is. And if they've already got that planned out, how are they going to get there, right? And enact that plan. If not, it may be they're just staying home. But one of the things I think that we'll also see, if they're able to, is reaching out to people they know or networks and their network of connections to people that are in the cities that are affected. And what can they do to help them? Because that's what we always do. And that's what they're going to do at this point until it becomes obvious or the situation changes where now you've got to worry about just you and your family and get out or get under, whatever the case may be. I think that's what the first 72 hours will look like, because honestly, they're going to go by like that. Everybody thinks so. So in the moments, there'll be moments of slow motion. But the fact is, those 72 hours are going to run out very quickly. And some people may not even have done anything in that 72 hours. But I think the smart people and the Christians will start again, because we know what the future holds, and it's time to prepare now. So I think that's what we'll see. And, I say good luck.
Yeah, I think we could all use a little bit of luck and grace as well. So we're going to move into what I call the practical payoff. And it's something I introduced a little over a week ago that focuses on one skill, one item, one mindset shift for all y'all in the audience relative to tonight's topic. So I think the way we're going to do this tonight is, Khalid, I'm going to come to you for a skill that you recommend, then Randy, then Ted, and then I'm going to go backwards, Ted, and you'll get first crack at the item, and then I'll go backwards again, and Randy, you'll get first crack at the mindset shift as far as what you recommend. So, Khalid, what is one skill that you recommend that people acquire based on tonight's subject matter?
Well, the biggest skill you need to acquire is the ability to defend yourself. And to defend yourself, you need to develop a level of mental maturity that allows you to operate in a high stress environment. That's a very difficult thing to do. Because most people, we've gotten so comfortable with living in a world where everything is handed to us. And when attacks like this happen, you need to take the lead, and you need to understand that you are responsible for the people around you as well, not just your family, but your neighbors and your community. And if you don't get to that mental level, that skill where you can actually be, what's the word? Where you could actually be a caregiver as well as a defender, you're going to lose, and so is your community. So the one skill I would say that you need to come up with to develop is the ability to reach beyond yourself, reach beyond your own needs, and think of your community as well. Think of your family, think of your community, think of those people that cannot do it for themselves because they're just disabled, they're elderly, and take care of them. Because when the world starts to collapse, and when the attack happens in the US, a lot of people will look at it from that point of view, that my world has collapsed. You need to be the one that understands that I need to step up and take care of those people that cannot do it for them. And I'm not talking about families around you that have other males that can take care of their own families. I'm talking about those people that are elderly, disabled, people that cannot do it for themselves. You need to make sure you're the one that steps up and takes care of them, because I come from the belief system where God rewards those who give to others. The more you give, the more reward you get from God, the more support you get from God, the more help you get from God. So if you're focused on yourself, and your family alone, you're not going to get the support that you need from the Almighty. So that's the one skill that I would say that everyone needs to have.
Yeah, great skill. But there's an old adage that goes something along the lines of, you get out what you put in. Essentially, the more you put into the mix, the more you get out of it. So,
Yep.
Randy, your crack at one skill related to tonight's topic that you recommend people acquire.
Well, I like what Khalid said. You know, the first skill he talked about was defending yourself, and obviously we're all going to need to do that. Whether it's defending yourself, your family, your neighborhood, your property, their property, that's a very good skill to have. What I would say on top of that, he also touched on with caregiver. You know, just like CPR, it's good for all of us to learn CPR because we don't know who's going to be the one that actually needs to know when something happens, who's going to be there and can make the difference in somebody's life or not. You know, I would say controlling and stopping bleeding. You know, how to install a tourniquet correctly. Any of those kind of medical skills that will save somebody's life, certainly if they're bleeding out, or a couple other things, even the airway kind of stuff. So I would say medical care would be the next really highly applicable skill if something like this were to happen.
Randy, actually, I asked Ted before Ted takes a crack at the skill. Did you catch that the Florida State Guard, which is accepting people up to the age of 60 to participate in it, will send everybody who signs up will get stop the bleed training, first aid training. It's a pretty kick-ass initiative, in my opinion.
Can I sign up from Texas for the Florida State Guard?
Well, I mean, you're an honorary Floridian. I'm sure
That's right.
Ted can pull some. So, Ted, you can comment on the Florida State Guard or not, but what I really like here is your advice on a skill relative to tonight's topic.
Well, on the Florida State Guard, I'm thankful they're there. I'm 71 almost, so I couldn't get in, but I'm glad they are there. And as far as a skill, don't wait till something happens. You got to have a strategy and a plan in place now before something happens, so that transition, assuming the worst case scenario, telecommunications are out, power is out, there is no internet, there is no law enforcement. If you're prepared, you start off with that action plan that you've written. You've got food put away. You've got, those kind of things. And my wife was very good. She bought all of our kids, go bags and survival kits. And then you start with the survival skills. Start with yourself, because you got to make sure the host is good. Then you look family, treat them, people around you, as Khalid and Randy said, and then security. you should have this already set up, arms and ammunition, and then telecommunications or some kind of comms, shortwave radio, ham operator. I'm a veterinarian, and we have medical supplies, suture material, antibiotics, IV fluids, stuff like that. And I'm blessed because I can do that. A lot of people can't, but there are going to be needing services, and people are going to need that stuff. And so I think the more prepared you are for that, and you got to watch your expiration dates on that. It'll make that transition a lot better. And then, the basics, food and water, filtration systems, things like that. So the skill you have, I think the best one you can have is be prepared ahead of time, and make the people look at, well, that was a lot of money I spent. Well, it's not money you're spending, it's money you're investing for that scenario you hope never happens. But it's kind of like carrying a spare tire in your car. You don't wait till you get a flat tire to go get your spare tire and buy one. You carry it around with you. And I think that's the best thing we can do. And, whatever talent you have, if you're an electrician or if you're a plumber or if you're a carpenter, all around MacGyver, fix it type of guy, utilize those skills and put them to work in the community that you're building.
Yeah, great advice, Ted. And I'll just quickly throw in what I put into the brief. My recommendation, being a comms guy, is get familiar with shortwave HF. If you can afford to get in on the game, the 3-part series I'm fixing to release, it'll be written articles and videos on 2026 SHTF comms options. Shortwave HF, and I'm super impressed that Ted mentioned it, is the only communications infrastructure that will work in a true Walking Dead scenario. If the satellites are down, the interwebs are down, the electrical grid is down, you will have nothing but shortwave HF. And we actually, Ted, I don't know how much you know about shortwave HF, but we've spent an obscene amount of money in the past 6 months on this particular series we're fixing to do, Dr. Mike and myself, that we've actually put together a pack. We don't sell hardware, so we just give people links and they can go buy it on their own. We put together a package with a Zygo G90 radio that's $400 with an MP1 DXG super antenna. And when you get the cable that goes with it, a tripod, et cetera, it's under $800 with taxes and shipping to get in on shortwave HF. That's unheard of, historically speaking. I mean, there's guys in the shortwave HF world that don't even think twice about spending $5,000 on an amp for their radio.
What's kind of neat is my son bought us stuff like that for like Christmas or something like that. So, as a family unit, we've kind of gone over different scenarios where we're going to meet, where's your go place to go, and where do you rendezvous.
That's fantastic. So I'm going to go backwards now so that you get first crack at it, unless you want to just say, go roll with the comms. But what's one item that is tied to tonight's topic that you highly recommend people get, like yesterday?
The one item. It depends on the scenario, and I'm going to plan on the worst case scenario. Food and water. I mean, you've got to have, if you don't have food and water, that's where you see all the conflicts breaking out around the world, and people that have food and water leverage that to control the other people. So food and water, filtration systems or chlorine tablets, and then build from there. Build your, protect yourself, protect your family, protect your community. But I think the one thing is a source of food and water.
Yeah.
And you know what? Bible.
That's funny you just said that, because that wasn't my answer in the brief, but it just crossed my mind before you said that, is you should probably have what Jeff Nicholas refers to as the book of SOPs. Every SOP that we need is in the Bible.
It is. It really is, isn't it? Can you imagine how simple life would be if we went back to the 10 Commandments and got rid of the thousands of laws on there? That's just crazy.
Sign me up. I'm all for simplification in that manner. So, Randy, your crack, one item that people should purchase right away to be prepared for a post 9/11 2.0 world.
Well, so we got the food, the water, and we got the Bible. So you kind of lightly talked about radios. You definitely need a radio or some way to communicate, but you're also going to need some form of self-defense.
True story. True story. Khalid, your one item.
Well, for me, it's again when you don't have anything, everything's gone. You need power generation, because even if you've got food, you need some way to keep it edible. Um, unless you've got a stockpile of carnival. Um, most people are going to need some form of power generation, and that means either having generators, having solar panels, or having some way to generate power so that they can keep their homes running. Um, the problem you're going to end up running into is too many people are going to look at it from a cost point of view and say, no, it's cost prohibitive. You may see it as cost prohibitive right now, but when you need it, you'll realize that's one of the best investments you can make, and it's one of the most important things you could have. Because when you've got food and you've got water and you've got self-defense, the only thing left is electricity.
Yeah.
Oh, you know what? I think he just let our whole crowd down. You know, everybody was hoping Khalid was going to say a shovel for BFE.
Oh, no.
I'm totally kidding. I'm totally kidding.
You don't do shovels. We don't bury them. We cover them and roll them, and we light them on fire, because burying them is not my job.
So we have to let Ted in on this. So Khalid has a solution to all problems that involve ignorant people, and he calls it battlefield execution, BFE for short. And I mean, now everybody says, "Well, Khalid, BFE." You know, that's how you solve the problem. It's guaranteed.
That sounds good to me. I'm with you, Khalid.
And on the topic, Ted, you mentioned spending money. Khalid just mentioned it with regards to power stations. I have an adage that I live by: buy once, cry once. In other words, spend the money, get the thing that you'll potentially need. Maybe it puts you in a little bit of a cash crunch for a short period of time, but buy once, cry once, get it over and done with. So, Randy, I'm going to come to you first on the final, which is a mindset shift, which, by the way, my choice on item was the same as y'all, or Ted, food and water in particular, especially Carnival with a 25-year shelf life, premium American meat. I eat this shit every single day. So it's not just a prepper product. It's that good. But a mindset shift, Randy, let me throw mine out there first, and then you guys can roll with it. My mindset shift is for people to stop thinking of preparedness as individual insurance and start treating it as community architecture, because we all know the concept of the lone wolf surviving in a post-apocalyptic world, that's Hollywood fantasy. That's not reality. So a mindset shift, Randy.
Well, one of my favorites, and I mentioned it last night, is never quit attitude, right? But where does that really come from? Where does that really, truly come from? Where does that energy and power come from? And it comes from faith. We must keep the faith. I watched Pale Rider not too long ago. Everybody's probably seen that movie, a Clint Eastwood 70s movie, Western, one of the spaghetti Westerns. And dang it, I forgot what I was going to say that he said. But regardless, oh, that's right. It's when in that movie, he's with the tin pans and he's with the poor people that have their rightful claims, and the rich guy is trying to run them off their claims. But basically, when he comes back into town, he talks to his guys who are supposed to run them off. They tell him that a pastor got in. You let a preacher in there? Boy, I tell you, how could you do that? Because 1 ounce of faith, and we'll never drive those folks out of there. I paraphrased what he said, but that's basically what it means. So really, what you're going to need for your mindset is faith. Faith in God, faith that he's going to help you out, and faith that you will find a way through him.
Awesome answer. Awesome answer. Ted, I'll come to you next. A mindset shift.
Attitude, the can-do attitude. Whatever I'm faced with, I can overcome that if I have the faith. The faith of a mustard seed can move mountains. And I think that's the biggest thing that people can have, is look at where you're going. You can't do anything about what happened. All you can do is how you move forward. And it's an attitude, that positive attitude that, yes, I can, we will make this happen. And then work with your family or community, whoever's left, and just you build from there. You've got no options. This is something what's innate in us. It's handed down through our creator, that it's kind of like a pine tree grows straight and drops pine cones, or an acorn, oak tree does that, because those are innate properties. We have innate properties of survival, of liberties and freedoms, and the desire to succeed. And we just have to be able to protect that and move forward. And so attitude to me is the one thing, because you've seen people, poor attitude, oh, woe is me, this is not going to happen. They're going to, go away on the wayside. Unfortunately, we can help them, try to bring them on, but they have to kind of make that decision for themselves too.
Yeah, true story. So, Khalid, do you want to share a mindset shift, or are you going to roll with just BFE this time? Because the crowd, the audience wants to hear you say it.
Well, look, when you come into a situation like this, I fully believe in the BFE concept. It's been built into us for over 10 years now. Because look,
Sure.
there are certain people that you cannot fix. You cannot fix them. So the only way to deal with them is to put them in the ground. But the mindset shift that I would go with is, look, at the end of the day, no matter how wealthy you are, no matter how poor you are, you end up in that 6-foot grave. And we all are the same when we enter that grave. So when you come to fight for unity and for the success of the United States in a situation like this, you all need to remember that we're all going to end up in the same place. That 6-foot grave is where we all end up. And it's not that, because I'm super wealthy, I get 20 feet and I get a big mausoleum. We all end up in the same place, and it's very easy to unite and work with people when everyone understands that is where the last point that we have on earth is right there. It's something we teach all of our strike teams. Doesn't matter where you came from, doesn't matter how much money you have, doesn't matter what you do. At the end of the day, you end up in that same grave that we end up in. Whether you're rich, whether you're poor, whether you're middle class, whether you're educated, whether you're not educated, that's where you end up. Fight for the glory of defending something you believe in. Because at the end of the day, that's all that matters.
Spoken like a true leader, Khalid. So, again, we're running long because slightly larger panel tonight and fantastic input. We're not going to do a really long sit rep. As a matter of fact, we're just going to look at two things in particular because I want to hear everybody's opinion on the panel. But that means that it's this time of night. Absolutely. Randy's all over. He's ahead of me. So 3, 2, 1. So it is time for the Carnival sit rep, but it's only going to be 2 stories. Ted, we're going to jump over to another stage. I hate to say it, but based on your audio problems, you're probably going to have to exit and come back in again. So we'll chew the fat while we're waiting for that to happen. But then again, who knows? Maybe you're okay. So hey, I don't even see him up on this stage. Let's see. Can you hear us, Ted?
So far, so good.
Oh, awesome. That's friggin' perfect. Yeah. So I've got a couple news articles that are related to the division in our country. So breaking news, 9 Maryland sheriffs have just announced they will ignore Democrat Governor Westmore's ban on cooperation with ICE and continue allowing officers to be deputized by the federal government for immigration screenings. 20 seconds.
The abolishment of the 287G program is not the abolishment of ICE. They're going nowhere. In fact, they're going to intensify their efforts. We warned them this was going to happen, and it's going to happen.
A warning on Wednesday issued by sheriffs from the 9 Maryland counties forced to end active partnerships with ICE under a new state law.
I love sheriffs in general, but I love the fact that they're standing up like this. Ted, you go ahead and take the first swing at this one.
No, I love that kind of attitude because where we're at with this immigration problem and ICE and DHS, it's cause and effect. We wouldn't be here had Biden and Obama didn't allow this mass invasion of our country. And so the mess has got to be cleaned up. It's going to be messy, but that's what happens when you elect those kind of people that tear down this country. And I stand with that sheriff, and I wish more sheriffs had the guts to do that. We've got several in Florida like that, one of them being Grady Judd. And he's one of those guys that, no, we're not going to listen to you guys. We're going to do this because this is what's right.
Yeah, I'll just take the opportunity to say God bless Grady Judd. He's a force to behold. Randy, your thoughts on these sheriffs taking a stand?
Well, we've said it for many times, right? What is the most important and the most powerful law enforcement official in your county? And it's the sheriff. And it's why it's important that sheriffs, one, sign their oath of office, actually take the oath of office and then sign it. Two, they need to be a constitutionalist or somebody that believes in the United States Constitution. And so because just like this, when parts of your government, whether it be the federal government or the state government, start deviating from the system and doing things that they shouldn't be doing, again, and then, issuing illegal or unlawful orders, they shouldn't be following them. And the sheriff is our first defense of that. As we mentioned before, during the lockdowns in 2020, if all the sheriffs in every county told them to take a hike, we're not going to, basically we're not going to enforce that rule because it's unconstitutional and it's illegal, it would have went away in about 10 seconds.
Exactly.
But they didn't. So I'm glad to see, and we need to see more of this. Yes, we love Sheriff Grady there in Florida, but we need more people like him and like these folks that just stood up. So that's what we need in every county in the United States, so that, at least we have some buffer between us and that kind of activity.
Yeah, I would just add to that, Randy, that the most important vote that each of us have is our county sheriff. That has the most potential impact on your day-to-day life, more so than any other vote that you make. Khalid, thoughts on this sheriff? 9 sheriffs taking a stand.
Well, I think this is just the beginning. Everyone in America is tired of all these illegals being given rights that they don't deserve. The violence against ICE to carry out what is federal law was outrageous, and we've discussed it on the show many times. I think this is the beginning of a wave starting, where a lot of sheriffs, a lot of deputies are not going to say, you know what, we're going to stand with the law. We're going to stand with America, and forget what, the Democrats have to say, because they're the reason this problem happened. You've got well over 500,000 people that have entered the country illegally, and it's a toll on the system. It is a toll on every resource that you have in the United States. It is a toll on everything that can happen. The worst thing that could happen is if the U.S. decided to pass a law like what Albania did, or what other European countries have done. So, you know what, it's too difficult to arrest and deport. We're going to allow them to become citizens of our country. These are not people that are going to give you any kind of benefit. And the more sheriffs that sign up, the more sheriffs that decide they're going to stand with the United States over what the Democratic governors have to say, the more success we're going to see in cleansing the U.S. of this problem.
Yeah, great answer, Khalid. So we have one more story to cover in tonight's sit rep. Guaranteed to raise all y'all's blood pressure. My watch will be going off in no time, telling me that I have an elevated irregular heartbeat. Susan Rice threatens that those who decided not to speak out against Trump or oppose him will not just be forgotten, but they're going to be held accountable. What are the chances that they would trot out this spook and piece of crap to threaten everybody who's against the globalist agenda? This is brutal.
But when it comes to the elites, the corporate interests, the law firms, the universities, the media, I agree with you, Preet. It is not. It's not going to end well for them. For those that decided that it was, that they would act in their perceived very narrow self-interest, which I would underscore is very short-term self-interest, and take a knee to Trump. I think they're now starting to realize, wait a minute, this is not popular. Trump is not popular. What he is doing, whether on the economy and affordability or on immigration now, is not popular. And that there is likely to be a swing in the other direction, and they are going to be caught with more than their pants down. They're going to be held accountable by those who come in opposition to Trump and win at the ballot box. And I can tell you, Preet, as I talk to leaders in Washington, leaders in our party, leaders in the state, if these corporations think that the Democrats, when they come back in power, are going to, play by the old rules, and say, oh, never mind, we'll forgive you for all the people you fired, all the policies and principles you've violated, all, the laws you've skirted. I think they've got another thing coming, because, just like when Trump thought, okay, I'll redistrict and the Democrats won't have but
Ted, you had to serve in DC at the same time as this anti-American person. Let me preface it quickly by saying that a group of very high-level retired generals paid a lot of money to surveil her during the entire 4 years that the Biden installation was in place. And when she was at the White House, which was frequently, she would go from her home, go out of her way to Obama's home, walk in with nothing in her hands, walk out with an attaché case, and then carry on to the White House from there. I've heard some of the audio that was captured, by the way, and she was his emissary. She was the one who was taking Obama's orders in. Of course, the last year of the Biden installation, we had Joe time on the books, right? Which was Obama just said, screw it. He wasn't going to use just an emissary, go do it himself. What are your thoughts of her threatening people, Ted, that everybody who's not part of their cabal is going to face repercussions?
The first thing I can say is come get me. I have no respect for that lady. She's talking about the elites like it's the conservatives or Trump or people that are supporting him, but she overlooks the elites of Obama, Clinton, Newsom, Pelosi, Schumer, all these people that they're out of power and they don't know how to deal with that. They get angry, they have all this violence. And keep in mind, Susan Rice is that great voice of Benghazi that said it was a B-rated or C-rated movie that made the Muslims mad and caused that. Give me a break. It was your stupid policies that were anti-American, and they have been. You've been run out of office. You're the ones. I'm not going to make any threats to her because I don't want, she can't survive in the environment she is. And when we win back and keep going on this agenda with a majority in the House and the Senate, and we keep America on track to heal the wounds that they did, she'll be but a footnote in some dusty book on a history shelf and never see her again. I had to deal with her. I went to a Council of Foreign Relations, which I'm not a fan of theirs, but I went there and she was there. And of course, I spoke out against, what they were doing. And it was fun because she's just a useful tool for Obama and the liberal, progressive, anti-American agenda. I'm done.
So I'm telling you right now, Ted, if you had one of these Garmin Tactics watches, I can tell from the look in your face, it would be going off. Like mine goes off all the time. I have it on mute right now. It's gone off 3 times since I heard her voice in the video. Randy, I'm coming to you next because I want to give Khalid the final say in tonight's episode.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you can look, I was even looking at her right then. You could tell looking at her face, she knows she's lying, that she knows she's not telling the truth. And, again, she's using the same old playbook the Democrats always do. And as you know, she just identifies as a Democrat. I don't really believe in left or right anymore, but she's one of those that identifies that way. And I find it ironic, just like her and all of them do. She goes in and mentions, we're going to go back and all the people you fired and all the lives you disrupted and yada, yada, yada. Well, what about what they did, during the 4 years of Biden? During the 8 years of Obama, what about all that stuff? What about all those people that got fired? What about all the people y'all have fired because they didn't take the vaccine, or you made them take it because they were going to get fired otherwise? But you want to talk about how this administration and all this is illegal, or they're doing this or they're doing that, and it's totalitarianism, and he's a king, he's a dictator, he's all this. Where when we know, just like the No Kings rally, if there was truly a king, they wouldn't have been out there rallying against him because, well, that's not what happens in monarchs and kingdoms. And just like her, the only reason she's able to get up here and say all this is because so far nobody's holding him, including her, accountable.
Well, anybody who's been tracking Tulsi Gabbard, let's say for the past 12 months or so, it is the incontrovertible truth that her and Obama and a bunch of other lackeys 100% worked to undermine President Trump in his first term, and probably committed the biggest example of sedition and treason in our country's history, bar none.
I think you can tell because look, her hairline's receded quite a bit. She's losing hair.
I mean, I'll just say she's an asshole straight up. There's no other way to describe it. Khalid, you get final say on this piece of work.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, Susan Rice is a traitor in category 1. There is no trial. There is no discussion. You want to come after us. There's this thing we call BFE. We have that especially held back for people like this. I agree with everybody else that, you know, you have Biden, you have Obama, you have Clinton, you have Schumer, you have Pelosi, you have so many people in the Democratic Party, quote unquote Democratic Party, that need to face real justice. And real justice is a simple bullet to the head and game over. And we'll leave you there and let your friends come and collect you, because you don't get to use the law against the people you don't like. That's not what the U.S. is about. That's what they did in the first administration when they used the CIA to undermine the Trump administration. They're doing it again now, and now you're making threats because it's not working. It's not working. It's not working. Well, when it's not working and the world starts to collapse, we have the battlefield execution to use for you.
and
now we know instead of a shovel, we need accelerant and a pack of matches.
Yep.
And let's pray that the CommieTube AI doesn't focus for those comments.
Chris, can I bring up something on this?
Absolutely. Go ahead, Ted.
If you listen to what she said at the very end, these people that did not speak out against Trump, we're going to hold you accountable. You talk about a threat of what they plan to do when they get back in power. What they did before is nothing like what they'll do. And people need to be aware of that because they have anger, they have revenge, and they want to go after and just go after our liberties and freedoms. I mean, that's a dangerous woman. And she's got the puppet master behind her, you know, Obama.
Yeah, very much so, very much so. So
yeah, you're absolutely right, Ted, because what she said was we're not going to play by the old rules anymore.
Right.
So let's translate that for the rest of the folks. We're not going to abide by the law anymore. We really didn't in the beginning to begin with, but now we're not going to care that you know. We're just going to go straight out.
Yeah.
Boom.
Yeah, 100%, Randy, 100%. So, Ted, great to see you. I really appreciate your time and insight. That was fantastic.
Good to meet you, Ted.
Same here, Randy and Khalid. Thank you, Chris. Thank you
great to meet you, Ted.
All kinds of positive comments on all three of y'all over on our Element server, plus the live chat that's going on out there. Khalid, I was going to say good to see you, but good to hear you. We'll put it that way. Which, by the way, I forgot to mention that when Khalid talked about how there was no X in Pakistan, that was because of him. They banned Khalid. And
you know, he's still got his John Deere cap on, I guarantee you.
Yep.
That
always.
That's America.
You wait to see him in his hat. It's pretty funny, actually. Anyway, appreciate your time, Khalid. Randy as well. I will be back Sunday evening with the See Heaven show, 7 p.m. Eastern. Go to See Heaven. So the letter C, you can see it on the screen right there. So seeheaven.substack.com, 7 p.m. Eastern on Sunday nights. I go through a bunch of my crazy recent bookmarks on X, and we make fun of people, especially retards. It only goes out to Substack and the X because it would for sure be a strike or a deplatform on the other platforms. But also want to thank our sponsors, as you can see from the banner down below, Carnival and Wasatch Wagyu. I think that's it. I think we covered it all. So between now and next time I see you on Sunday night, please like, share, comment, and subscribe. God bless our law enforcement officers. God bless our troops. God bless America.
And God bless
Y'all
America.
take care. Thank you.
Enjoy the closing video. That's a compilation of crazy, you know what's, with the 1,000 milligram stare. Enjoy.
Just to be clear, we are well past fuck ICE at this point. It is now fight ICE.
Oh, well, she was trying to run him over. It's self-defense. I wish she was, and I wish she did. And guess what? If she did and he died, I would have celebrated, because ICE aren't people. They're fucking demons in human form.
Yeah, just to be entirely clear here, just to not split any hairs, if you support ICE, you are just as bad as ICE. You're a cancer on humanity that should be excised. That is to say, I want you dead.
The only true way to make America great again is to kill a fucking Nazi. So good luck, Godspeed.
I have an idea. A No Kings protest, but we have weapons and we use them.
Violence against the state. The answer is violence against the state. It's always been violence, has always been the answer. If you are not loudly advocating for the death and imprisonment of almost everyone in this administration, and everyone that has participated in these ICE operations, then you're a fucking collaborator.
Remember, if ICE tries to police your polling station, mark your ballot in their blood. Thank you.
If they try to break into your home without a warrant, blow their heads off.
I don't want impeachment! I don't want them to serve time! I want them taken into the city town square, hung from their ankles, and cut them from groin to chin!
I just want to know when the fuck we light the torches and get the pitchforks, because we just need to burn this bitch down and start the fuck over. So, you with me? Let's roll.
Oh! Bitch!
So, like, if you just executed one of these Nazis in broad daylight, no, you didn't. No, you didn't. 40 people were there. You didn't execute him. He was threatening your life. Jury of your peers, get out of here.
Because ICE has a violent track record of kidnappings and what now looks like murder, right? So when we see them, we don't need to be answering no questions. We don't need to be asking no questions. We just need to, whoa, hey, sir, boom. That's all I need to do. That's all we need to be doing.